James Franklin, Joe, has decided to go back into coaching after being fired a couple of weeks ago. Well, a couple of months, a month and a half ago now by Penn State. As James Franklin has taken the job for Virginia Tech. As we get into this, how do you see Virginia Tech hiring James Franklin as their next head coach?
I think this is one of those few circumstances where it's a perfect move on both sides. I think that Virginia Tech is a really underrated brand in college football. They have had sustained periods of success under Frank Beamer, and they have not been able to get back there. Those that maybe don't have a national scope of what the recruiting landscapes look like, Virginia, where Virginia Tech is located, has an opportunity to produce a lot of really high-level players because of being able to tap into the DMV. I was just talking to my roommate who was a high school football recruit back in the day in Northern Virginia, and he was basically just saying to me, most kids would kill to go to Virginia Tech if it was a top team. James Franklin, and I think that this is where the conversation gets a little bit convoluted, because it's very hard for us as college football fans to properly assess how good a coach is. They either suck or they're great. James Franklin is not a top 10 coach, but he's at least worthy of the top 15 discussion. He is not a coach that will win a national championship, but he is somebody who can win 10 games every single year and exceed recruiting expectations. You see it with all the guys that decommitted from Penn State after James Franklin left. You see it from all, which is an insane number. You see all of his players coming out vocal in support of James Franklin. Blake, I think that he is going to be able to step in there in a conference that is very winnable, put together one of the best rosters, and have a consistently winning team. I don't think that they'll ever win a national championship under him, but this is a perfect marriage between two sides that Virginia Tech's just looking for consistency, and James Franklin gets a situation that the expectations aren't so high that they end up crushing him.
James Franklin won double-digit games at Penn State 6 seasons. Last year, got to the Final Four of the playoff. And, Joe, I asked the question, did Penn State make I don't even know how to ask this, but did they make a mistake? Now, they will say that they didn't, but this coach was in the Final Four a year ago. I understand that you put a lot into this and into this season, and it didn't go the way that you'd hoped. But you're right. Virginia Tech was trying to find and trying to get back to the sustainability of where they are. And I think that you bring up a point where the ACC is a down conference. Look at them right now. Look at them last year. I mean, Joe, a 3-loss team last year won the conference in Clemson. You could have a scenario where if it's not Georgia Tech, you know, what's going to happen with SMU here? We'll talk about them this week. You look at it as a conference and say, listen, if I'm given the resources and I'm given the ability in that area to recruit, maybe I can rebuild this. Now, Virginia Tech fans, you got to give them at minimum 2 years before you start expecting results. This is a rebuild here. But, Joe, here's the question that I'm going to ask. I think and say to some extent, I do think that this could be I don't want to say home run because I don't know if I like the term home run hire. But what I would say is James Franklin's going to recruit his rear end off. He's going to recruit at a high level. It's what he does. They develop at a high level. I'm sure he's going to put a good staff together. Is Virginia Tech willing to commit to what it takes to be great? That area and that area of recruiting is very good. And he can bring a lot of really good players to an atmosphere, to a place where can be rocking. Virginia Tech and Blacksburg at night, it's one of the most special venues in all of the country. So I think you need to give him time here. But I think that this is a massively great hire for Virginia Tech if they give him the time. It's not the only thing that they got to give him. You got to give him time, and you got to give him the resources. Because quite honestly, SMU spending money, Georgia Tech is spending money. We know what Miami and Florida State will do. Now, I don't know if Florida State wants to fire Mike Norvell, but that's a whole different conversation. Look, man, what does Dabo and Clemson do next season? What do they continue to do? James Franklin being at Virginia Tech with the infrastructure that you already have built from within, if you give him the resources in one of the toughest conferences in the country, he can put a winner together to go where you want to go. Maybe not Penn State, but Joe, I would push back maybe a little bit. I don't know if he's not in the top 10 of coaches based off of, look, there's not a lot of people that have won as that many 10 games in that conference. To be completely blunt with you, to be real with you, he's gotten further than a Dan Lanning multiple times. He has the same, I mean, like when you're comparing.
Dan Lanning's a better coach
I
than
agree.
James Franklin.
I agree. At the same time, he's got more skins on the wall. This guy got to a Final Four. So, again, I would just say I don't know where I'd rank him, but even if he's a top 15 head coach, you're Virginia Tech and you got a top 15 head coach.
Well, this is part of –
and by the way, I would take Dan Lanning over James Franklin. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you get what I'm trying to say. He's got a lot of skins on the wall.
But okay, this is part of what I was getting at when I was bringing this up. There is a spectrum to evaluating coaches. It can be true that he was highly successful at winning regular season games. Mm-hmm. It can also be true that he failed to bring Penn State up to what its standard was, which is in the national championship conversation. The 1 year where it felt like they legitimately were in the national championship conversation, they lost in the Final Four last year. Sorry, the 2 years, I guess. They lost in the Final Four last year to a more inexperienced coach. And on top of that, this year, they completely collapsed and crumbled. So that's part of this is you're allowed to be a really good coach, but it doesn't mean that we have to put him in the elite category. But this is all part of why I think that this is perfect for Virginia Tech, is that they look at the list of guys that they had interviewed and that they brought in after Frank Beamer left. Overall, for the most part, they weren't going and bringing in top candidates, guys that had this much success and experience as what James Franklin has. I mean, heck, the last coach was the defensive coordinator from Penn State. So you're now able to bring in a big name that is going to do great things in recruiting. I just really stand by the fact that I think that regionally Virginia is set up to be in a really strong position to build up into the hotbed of bringing in all those top recruits. And they could pluck guys from Maryland as well that typically end up going to Maryland. And now, because he spent so much time recruiting in Pennsylvania, you're able to go and grab guys from Pennsylvania to come in as well. There's just such underrated talent. And a lot of these recruiting rankings every single year, when we see the lists of top guys, a lot of them are populated in that area. There is a real opportunity for him to turn this team into a 10-win team every single year, go to the college football playoff, maybe win a couple of playoff games here and there. This is a really perfect connection in my eyes because of some of these things that we're talking about.
But they got to give him the resources.
Well, but so they did. As soon as they fired Pry, they talked about how that there is this massive boost to the resources and the funding that they're putting towards football. I don't have the exact number, but that was like
25.
It might have been more than that.
Well, you got to do it every year. By the way, just a news flash to everybody, and here would be the counteract to that I'll get in a minute. He just was given $20 million and he went 3-3. So listen, it's cool to say that you are going to put the resources in there, but we'll see ultimately if they do that. They very well may. They're going to have to. Joe, this is also a win for Penn State too. This contract's going to come out in reference to whatever he's being paid. That reduces their buyout. So now that you have a reducing buyout because he's going to another team, again, let's say he's getting paid $5 million a year, whatever it is, they're going to have to pay probably half of that now. So it's a win-win for both of them. James Franklin was given money at Penn State this last year, and it didn't go the way that he wanted. Does that happen at Virginia Tech? That will be the ultimate question. I don't think that it will, but can they move forward here? I think this is a great hire for them. I really do. You got to give him time and you got to give him the resources, but we'll see.
Two quick things, notes to add to this conversation.
Okay.
So Virginia Tech proposed adding, and I believe this went through, adding $229 million to its athletic budget over the next 4 years. So that's part of what we're talking about here, how they realized that
$50 million a year.
That's just for athletics, though. So I don't know how much more is going.
Right. So about $50 million a year.
Yeah. Which they said their football athletics budget before that was $41 million, which was $20 million lower than Florida State. So I would think a good portion of that probably is going to football. Brandon Marcello reported in terms of the buyout, Penn State and James Franklin recently negotiated his buyout down to $9 million. His contract called for a buyout of $49 million to be paid through 2031, which could be offset by future earning at another job. And he's now headed to Virginia Tech. So Marcello kind of pointed out that it's
what a win for Penn State. That's a massive win for Penn State. But the same time for Penn State, here's a couple of things because this is all kind of mingled into one another. You've lost 17 recruits. So whoever's going there, they're going to have to rebuild here. And listen, Penn State, as someone who's been through and is going through currently a team that I cover every day through a coaching search, you better just give time. You struck out on Elko. I mean, that's pretty much well known. They were after Mike Elko. Does Eli Drinkwitz take that job? And so that will be a question mark that I think gets played out here, but you're going to have to let this thing rebuild. I get your part. Joe, I got to be blunt with you. I'm still a little floored that they fired James Franklin 6 games into the season. I know he was 3-3. I get it. But at the same time, when you let him go, things started collapsing. So you're going to have to let the next guy, regardless, you're going to have to let him rebuild. Can it take 2 years? Can it take 1? The Kurt Cignetti thing isn't always going to happen. And I think people need to understand that.
I do think that you bring up a really good point here that it's less about Penn State deciding to fire James Franklin, and it has everything to do with the timing. There's a reason why a lot of times we talk about why it's not a good decision just to fire a coach mid-season. If you don't have guys that are committed to wanting to go to the school, you risk them just decommitting and going elsewhere or waiting for said coach that they were committed to and maybe committing to them wherever they end up going, whatever it might be. And I feel like it wouldn't shock me if we don't see a lot of these kids that wanted to go to Penn State end up going to Virginia Tech because they really liked James Franklin.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just think it's going to work. I think he's a recruiter.
Yeah.
He's a recruiter. And I see somebody in the chat saying we don't talk about the ACC enough. Well, there's not a team in there that's a true contender. And by the way, we talked about 2 ACC games last week. So don't come up in here talking shit to us. By the way, your conference sucks. Right now,
we spent a lot of the preseason hyping up these ACC teams, and it's not our fault that the ACC has produced duds with Clemson and Florida State.
No doubt. And listen, James Franklin has been in one of the elite conferences in the country and did continue to get to 10 wins. Can he do it in the ACC of Virginia Tech?
Yeah.
That will be the question. All right.